Just in time for Halloween, Cyanide Games is finally releasing the long-awaited investigative RPG Call of Cthulhu. Despite going through a horrific development that even H.P. Lovecraft couldn't imagine, Call of Cthulhu finally brings its haunting adaptation of a classic pen-and-paper RPG to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Was it worth the wait? Let's find out. Publisher Focus Home Interactive classifies Call of Cthulhu as a narrative investigation RPG, meaning you'll be spending most of your time looking for clues, talking to NPCs, and putting together the pieces of the mystery. You play as war veteran turned private detective Edward Pierce, who is a war-hardened veteran now working as a fading private detective who's suffering from PTSD and is quick to lean on the bottle for support. One evening, after suffering through another one of his nightmares, Pierce is called upon by a citizen of Darkwater, a small island off the coast of Boston that was once a thriving whaling town. Pierce is tasked with investigating the strange death of the Hawkins family, a prominent family headed by Charles Hawkins, a successful businessman, and Sarah, a polarizing artist whose paintings are both in high demand and deeply disturbing. Once Pierce arrives on the dark, dreary island, it's obviously something is amiss. With each person you meet, Pierce quickly discovers that the Hawkins were no ordinary family and that their case may not be as cut and dry as some believe. What unfolds from here is a dark survival horror experience with some light RPG elements. These RPG elements consist of a skill tree that Pierce will rank up throughout the 10-hour story. All but 2 of these stats are increased using character points that are earned by completing objectives. The other 2, occultism and medicine, are ranked up by investigating items in the world that pertain to either occultism or medicine. Ranking up these abilities will give you access to additional dialogue paths, improved chances of lockpicking, and other perks. Let's start with the things that I liked about Call of Cthulhu. I've always been a fan of games that offer different outcomes based on your actions, and in Call of Cthulhu's case, a narrative-driven investigative experience, it's a design choice I'm glad Cyanide Games implemented, and it adds the replay value as well. The more effort you put into the game, the more you'll get out of the narrative. For example, every piece of evidence or clue that you find while searching high and low gives Edwards the information he needs to unlock additional dialogue branches when you're interrogating many of the game's central characters. You can also affect your character's destiny by the decisions you make, whether it be the simple act of taking a pull from a bottle of whiskey to deciding the fate of another character. If you want the full narrative experience, spending as much time as possible searching is well worth it. Another amusing element to the game were the puzzles that needed to be solved in order to progress the story. One of them had you sneaking around a mental asylum trying to activate 4 generators that powers a contraption that, when activated, would provide you with the necessary distractions so that you could sneak past the guards. Another one later on has you making your way through an otherworldly dimension that requires you to look at your surroundings carefully to determine the safest path. Sure, it's mostly trial and error, but they were unique and offered an appreciated change of pace. The presentation of Call of Cthulhu is somewhat of a mixed bag. In some ways, it's the game's biggest strength, while in others, it's also its biggest weakness. From the very beginning, we know this is going to be a dark and twisted story, and it's obvious that Cyanide Games has great respect and love for the source material. Every location I visited was engrossing and full of atmosphere, especially the later chapters when we discover the dark secrets that the island of Darkwater holds. Every location and every big-time moment was complemented perfectly by the game's original score. While the environments and atmosphere were strong, there were a plethora of issues and shortcomings that took away from the overall experience. The biggest culprit being the character models, specifically the voice acting and character animations. While Edward and a few of the other main characters were decently voiced, there are others that suffer from cringe-worthy performances. And to make matters worse, the lip sync on display here is downright awful. Animations as a whole aren't quite where they need to be, and it can be quite distracting when you see characters twisting awkwardly during delivery of lines.
Come on, keep the smile. You don't want to force me to widen it.
The next area that I was disappointed with were the boss battles with the Shambler, an abomination that only H.P. Lovecraft could conjure up. This reminded me of the Lycan battles in the Order 1886, where we have this horrific looking beast that hunts you down in a small space. However, since combat isn't really an option in Call of Cthulhu, you simply run around a room and try to figure out a way to chase the beast off. In the end, it's an unsatisfying experience, and I wish there would have been more to each of the encounters with the Shambler. While I appreciate the RPG elements featured in Call of Cthulhu, I'm not sure it's deep enough to please RPG enthusiasts. You know you have a good skill tree when you find yourself spending more time than you'd like waffling over where to put your skill points next. However, that was not the case with the RPG elements in Call of Cthulhu. I often found myself opening the menu only to find 5 or more character points sitting there waiting to be applied. At no point did I feel like my skill tree had a major impact on my character's overall ability. The skill tree here feels like an afterthought, and it's not as deep or as fleshed out as I like in my RPGs. Call of Cthulhu reminds me a lot of John Carpenter's classic underrated horror films such as In the Mouth of Madness or Prince of Darkness. It features an engaging and haunting story, clever twists, some well-placed scares, and a consistently creepy vibe with a pinch of campiness sprinkled in that I could totally appreciate. While the light RPG elements may not please genre enthusiasts, and the lack of any real combat may underwhelm those looking for some action in their survival horror games, there's more than enough in terms of story and presentation for those who are in the mood for a well-told horror story. It may not be the most polished experience available, but if you can look past its flaws and appreciate what it does well, this is a call worth answering. If you enjoyed this review and found it useful, please consider hitting the thumbs up button. We'd also like to hear your thoughts on Call of Cthulhu in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.